Good morning. It is Wednesday, October 15th, 2014. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, a 56-year-old UN worker infected with Ebola has died in Germany in spite of being treated with an experimental treatment against the virus. In an exclusive interview with the UN Secretary General's spokesman, Stéphane Dujarric, we take a closer look at Ban Ki-moon's visit to Israel and Gaza. And later on the show, another exclusive interview with the president of the World Jewish Congress, Mr. Ron Lauder. Good morning. I am Yael Levi, and we begin with our main topic of the day. The Ebola virus. It's still sadly making and generating headlines and unfortunately also more victims. A 56-year-old UN aid worker who worked in Liberia and contracted the virus there has died in a hospital in Germany. Now, before we hear more about it, let's take a look at the following report.
The United States is rethinking its Ebola policy. The recent infection of a nurse in Texas has raised concern over the possible spread of the disease. Moreover, authorities attributed the incident to a breach in protocol. In response, experts have started to communicate information to the public in hopes of stopping the virus in its tracks.
The existence of the first case of Ebola spread within the U.S. changes some things, and it doesn't change other things. It doesn't change the fact that we know how Ebola spreads. It doesn't change the fact that it's possible to take care of Ebola safely. But it does change substantially how we approach it.
The move follows a damning report by the U.S. Association of Nurses, showing that some 80% of its members in 25 states have had no formal training in treating Ebola. After being limited to 3 West African countries, the disease is threatening the West. At least one case was previously confirmed in Spain, and on Tuesday, a UN employee who contracted the disease in Liberia died in Germany. The latest outbreak of the virus, for which no vaccine currently exists, has killed more than 4,000 people.
We're joined from London by I-24 News European correspondent there, Jonathan Sachadati. Jonathan, good morning to you. And from Germany, joining us, a journalist from Das Bild, Thor Schroeder. Good morning to you as well. Mr. Schroeder?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for Boker Tov. Thank you for joining us this morning. As we said, Thor Schroeder, a journalist with Das Bild. Good morning, and thank you for being with us. Well, you're in Germany. First of all, tell us what are the reactions in the country to this very sad news of yet another Ebola victim in Europe, this time passing and dying and actually not surviving the virus in Germany?
The death did cause headlines these past 2 days, but I think people are not panicking so far, as I think the overall sentiment is that we are dealing well with the patients coming to Germany. And I think we need to put it into perspective also. There's been about 9,000 identified and suspected cases all over the world, and 16 only outside of Africa. And now we have had 3 patients in Germany, and one of them has died. So, yeah, there's no outbreak as such in Germany, of course.
No, definitely. There is no outbreak. But that said, we are seeing these Ebola cases, very sporadic one, albeit sporadic, coming up in the Western world, clearly in Dallas, and now a nurse infected in Germany, a death. Are you sensing, and clearly this is not an outbreak, but what is the public's reaction? And do people feel in Germany, per se, where you're at, that they're getting enough information from the authorities?
I think so. There has been a recent poll on the weekend in the Sunday newspaper, which said that 58% of Germans fear that the epidemic could come to this country, and 85% want tougher border controls, which we do not have in place yet, as, for example, in the U.S. at certain airports, or in London, in the U.K. But I think overall people are thinking that the national protocol is working just fine so far.
Okay, Thor Schroeder of Das Bild, do stay with us on the line. We are also joined now, we had a bit of a technical problem before, by Jonathan Sachadati, our European I-24 News European correspondent. Jonathan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Okay, well, clearly that's the German news that we've had since yesterday. And the understanding also that at Heathrow now, screenings have begun to test for Ebola. Is that the case?
That is the case, and we've also heard that US President Barack Obama will hold a video conference today with the leaders of Britain, France, Germany and Italy to discuss the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. But of course the fear is that whatever we do to combat and contain the spread of the disease might not be enough, because all it takes is one small human error each time for transmission to occur. So far, usually in cases where medical staff have been caring for those suffering from Ebola. But each time that happens, fear grows a little bit within Europe and elsewhere in the world. And there is the fear that then it will make the next leap from healthcare workers to the general population. Yeah. But as you say, in Heathrow Airport Terminal 1, screening started yesterday and the day before with questionnaires and taking of temperatures of passengers coming from those high-risk areas. And that is set to roll out across all of Heathrow's terminals, and then at Gatwick Airport, also in London, during the rest of the week, at high cost to the United Kingdom of around £9 million.
£9 million to do those screenings. And Thor, I'm sure they're joining us also still from Germany on the line. Are there screenings expected now in Germany's airports?
Please come again.
Are there screenings screenings to test for Ebola expected now also in Germany's airports? Any measures that the authorities in Germany have said that they're going to put in place to try, and prevent any other cases from entering the country?
There are no such teams at the airport yet, although there is a certain protocol that would be followed if a passenger would show certain symptoms on the airplane, like, for instance, fever above 38.5 degrees, vomiting, diarrhea, bleeding. He would be separated from the rest of the passengers, and these passengers would be labeled and put into quarantine. So there is a protocol, but there's no testing on the airports at the moment.
And those have not been demanded by the population or any criticism in terms of that, in terms of the reaction to the death of the UN worker in Germany?
Well, as I pointed out before, there is such sentiment, which the poll that I just quoted shows that 85% of the people do demand tougher border control. The problem also is that we are a federal state, so it is also left to the different states, of 16 states of Germany, how to deal with it. For example, in Munich, they have put up a certain infectious team to deal with this situation, and in the state of Niedersachsen, they are especially taking care of the refugee camps because they are fearing that there could be an outbreak in one of these places. So, yes, people are taking care.
And is there any information in terms of the experimental drug that was used with the Ebola patient in Germany who sadly passed away? Because supposedly an experimental drug that everybody was speaking about was used to try and help him, but he did, he died eventually, sadly. Any information coming out of that?
All I know about this case is that he was already in very critical condition when he arrived to Germany last week, and that doctors were saying that the probability of treating him positively wasn't very high. So I have no information on whether this medicine was used.
And in that respect, Jonathan Sachadodi, when it comes to experimental drugs and et cetera, on the medicine cutting edge of this, there seem to be reports that something's trying to be developed very, very, very quickly, which sadly has not been the case thus far, when Ebola has been a disease that existed in Africa for many, many, many years. But in the UK, when it comes to public opinion, and I know that people are always very calm and collected, but is there concern? Is the concern rising now with screenings at the airports?
Concern is rising. I mean, I wouldn't say there's panic among the general population yet, but it's certainly the case that people are wondering. I was just discussing with friends yesterday whether or not they felt taking the tube was a good idea, the underground here, whether they felt that it was a possible incubator for coughs and colds and other diseases like Ebola. Of course, these things are at the moment still at the level of a bit of a joke, but people are thinking twice about what kinds of situations they're getting in case there could be this transmission of the disease, which, of course, as we know, is transmitted through bodily fluids, so coughs and sneezes and the like. And even in the cases where we see those medical healthcare workers wearing these protective suits. We've then heard of cases of the disease still managing to be transmitted through presumably human error in the removal of those suits after touching patients. But that seems to get people very worried that this is highly contagious. And we're hearing mixed messages from officials at government level and health officials, which some are saying that this is not highly contagious, that even when you come into contact with the bodily fluids, it's a low chance of transmission. But then we see these news stories of healthcare workers treating people in West Africa, transmitting the disease despite the precautions we see on the news, and people are, of course, conflicted or confused. Ebola has so far killed more than 4,000 people in West Africa, and the first cases outside Africa are being reported both here in Europe and in the US, as we've heard. So far, most of the dead have been in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. But we know, as the health secretary here in the United Kingdom have said, it's inevitable that within the coming months we will have, as he put it, a handful of Ebola cases here in the United Kingdom. And hearing things like that is only making people more concerned, even though we know the screening in the airports is starting to roll out, and we know that doctors and frontline medical staff here are being briefed on how to deal with the outbreak that may be coming our way.
No, definitely. And Tor Schroeder from Das Bild in Germany, it's all a matter of isolation and quick isolation when it comes to Ebola, so it seems. And any reports when it comes to people who were close to the UN worker who passed away yesterday of the virus, and have they been put into isolation?
They have not. This clinic, St. Georg Clinic in Leipzig, is one of 7 clinics in Germany that possesses a so-called specialized isolation unit, which costs about 15,000 euros to run every day, which is 75,000 shekels. These places are meant to be very safe also for the people working there, not only because they possess specially filtered air condition, those treatment rooms which kind of function like a giant vacuum cleaner, so all the germs are being sucked away, but also because the medical personnel is specially trained that is working there and being monitored, especially at that moment when they are taking off their protective gear, which is the key moment apparently, and the moment when these 2 nurses that have been affected in both Dallas and Madrid did catch the virus. So, no, they are not being monitored, especially, I believe.
Well, that's, I think, a thing that's concerning to everybody, and especially, of course, the medical staff who has to, who is dealing and trying to help the people who have already been diagnosed or contracted the disease. But again, we will be following Ebola and the attempts to isolate, quarantine people and stop its spread all across the Western world, and as well, of course, the victims in Africa. Thank you both for joining me this morning. Thor Schroeder from Germany, Das Bild, and of course, Jonathan Sachadati, our European correspondent, who will be staying with us for the next item. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon finished his visit to Israel and Gaza late last night. It was a visit that came right after the SG led a conference in Cairo to help reconstruct Gaza, where approximately $5 billion were pledged to assist in rebuilding the Palestinian enclave after this summer's war between Israel and the Gaza Strip, in which most of it, the Gaza Strip, was destroyed by airstrikes of the IDF. And we had the honor to interview UN Secretary General spokesman Mr. Stéphane Dujarric yesterday, and here is what he told us in an exclusive interview a short while before leaving the country. First of all, how did today go?
It was a very moving day for the Secretary General. I think it was the 3rd time he'd been to Gaza after the 3rd military operation, and I think, as he said in Cairo in his speech, this cycle of build and destroy has to stop. So he very much hopes this is the last visit to Gaza under these circumstances. But I think in terms of how the visit went, it was focused on the political, on the economy, and on the humanitarian. I think on the political, he had a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister of the Government of National Consensus, and I think they had a full cabinet meeting there recently. This unity we're now seeing with the Government of National Consensus is extremely important for the peace process to go forward. We visited a project run by UNDP focused on help to fisheries, and I think we forget the economic impact here as well. I think that the blockade and that the lack of economic relations with the outside has created a society with almost over 60% youth unemployment, where there's just no money coming in. So we have to help restart the Gazan economy, and by opening up Gaza not only to Israel but to Egypt to trade, it'll be good for peace and it'll be good for the economy.
Now, and in his meetings, of course, the Secretary General obviously also met with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't think it's a secret that relations between the two have not been so cushy as of late, especially since the last UNGA. And also, the Secretary General was very upfront in press, in the media, saying that the settlements are an issue, and he came strongly against those. How did the meeting go with the Israeli Prime Minister?
It was a good meeting, good exchange of views, but I think everybody lasted a long time. We were encouraged by the Israelis' enthusiasm for putting the mechanism to operationalize it, and we saw the results today with the first truck going in. The Secretary General's position on the issue of settlements is unchanged on the issue of the occupation, but I think that doesn't stop both the Secretary General and the Prime Minister from having very constructive conversations, and for the Secretary General to encourage both the Palestinians and the Israelis to return to the table, because unless the underlying causes, the root causes, are dealt with, we're not going to break the cycle of build and destroy.
The Israelis claim that the efforts on behalf of the Palestinians to try and acquire statehood unilaterally through the UN will be detrimental to the process itself. Is there any attempt to try and stop those efforts?
Well, I think the Secretary General's position, as far as that is to encourage the Palestinians to continue with the negotiating process, to go back to the table, and that's what he's told them, and that's what he's also told the Israelis. But I think both sides have to realize there is no alternative. We've seen the cycle of violence. Today we also met with families in Israel who close to the Gaza border. We saw the tunnels. The Secretary General met with families who had been impacted by the Hamas rockets. Met the grandparents of a 4-year-old who died. We met with parents who'd lost children in Gaza. Children should not die. 4-year-olds, whether in Israel or Gaza, did not commit any crimes. They should not die. And I think it's up to political leaders to sit down at the table and find a way forward.
I mean, critics on both sides say that pledging money after the fact, after these wars, what does it do? I'm not even talking about tunnels, but can anything else be done? It seems like the two sides need a third party to intervene.
Well, I think it's not an either or. We definitely need the money. We've seen the destruction. We need the money. We've seen the state of the Gazan economy. I think the Secretary General has also been very supportive of the efforts by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. We worked hard with him over the summer during the ceasefire, and I think we're all working with one goal. And I think the United Nations is, the Secretary General is, and I think all the countries that are concerned are pushing for the two parties to get back to the table.
We interviewed Chris Gunner several times, and there was the argument of the Israelis that weapons were being stored up in UN facilities throughout the last operation, even I think even the one before that. That's something that the Israelis keep using as capital when it comes to money being funneled in.
I think we've addressed it. The Secretary General even today directly in the school condemned weapons being put in UN schools, and the weapons that were found in the schools were schools that were abandoned. They were not guarded, they were empty. Obviously, this was a time of conflict. There was no security around these places. When UNRWA found them, it said so loud and clear. It condemned it. The Secretary General condemned it.
It seems like the Israeli-Palestinian issue is actually on the back burner.
I don't think so. First of all, the Secretary General is here, so it's clearly not on the back burner. He has a representative here, Robert Seri, who's special coordinator, who's been extremely active, who is critical in securing this mechanism. So we have the capacity, obviously, to deal with these issues, and he's working hard. He's focused on them.
Today, Britain voted overwhelmingly to recognize Palestine as a state. There seems to be a push to do so in various European countries. It's very much scaring the Israelis. Is there a feeling amongst, by the Secretary General or in the UN that this is, and I'm asking this again, that this is something that helps the peace process or works against it?
I think the two parties need to decide that they need to sit down at the table. There are a lot of external factors, a lot of external pressures in different directions, but at the end of the day, they are the ones who are going to have to sit down and agree and deal with the underlying causes.
And I am joined by Jonathan Sachadati, once again, I-24 News European correspondent. Jonathan, thank you for still being with us. You know, when I sat yesterday with Stéphane Dujarric, the UN Secretary General spokesman, there was a discussion about the money that was pledged in Cairo for the reconstruction of Gaza. And the Palestinians originally asked for $4 billion. Approximately $5.4 billion were eventually pledged by several countries. Britain, I think, $230 million. In Britain, is there a concern, and that's something I also posed to the Secretary General yesterday, a concern that that money might be funneled, or is anybody raising that concern, that that money might be funneled eventually to other causes rather than just reconstructing Gaza, but also to reconstructing the tunnels that Hamas builds, you know, to try and infiltrate Israel? Any voices of that in Britain?
I think there are concerns about that. And as you asked in that interview about the storage of weapons in the United Nations facilities within Gaza, especially in schools, there is a concern that the United Nations perhaps isn't acting as a fair player in this conflict. Once is an accident, twice, well, maybe you can cut them some slack on that, but 3 times and maybe even more times than that, weapons were found, and the UN admitted to weapons being found in those facilities. So there are those, of course, in Britain, minority voices, but loud nonetheless, asking where exactly this money is going to go and how it's going to be ensured that that money goes into regenerating and rebuilding Gaza for civilians rather than into the pockets of Hamas and other extremist groups. And similarly, you and I have discussed in previous news stories the issues that were touched on by the Daily Telegraph here in the United Kingdom not that long ago, of UK aid money being used to pay the families of those in prison, Palestinian prisoners who are in prison for having killed multiple Israelis in terror attacks. So with the background of these facts, of this knowledge, there are those here in the United Kingdom who are wondering exactly how we can ensure that that money being given, understandably, to help regenerate the civilian population of Gaza's homes and facilities, how that can be ensured that it will go where it's meant to.
Where it's meant to go. A valid point, and I think something that nobody seems to be able to answer yet. Also, when it comes to, you know, the interview with the Secretary General's spokesman, we are looking at a time now where the UN is pounded, obviously, by a Palestinian effort to garner recognition as a state unilaterally, as the peace process, if one can still call it that, is not really progressing, as we know. But when we sat yesterday, Stéphane Dujarric and myself, there was a discussion about this trend of European countries currently basically voting unilaterally to recognize Palestine as a state, something that basically happened in Britain, you know, this week. But that's a move that when it's, you know, when it's voted in Parliament doesn't really mean that Cameron, that the Prime Minister, has to go ahead and do that, right? It was overwhelmingly voted as yes to recognize Palestine yesterday. Sorry, 2 days ago.
Well, it emphatically isn't a change in UK foreign policy, and the Prime Minister's spokesman and the Minister relating to these issues in the Middle East have actually made sure to specify that this does not change UK foreign policy. The United Kingdom government does not recognise a state of Palestine. So the reason that there is this confusion is because this was the result of a fairly new procedure here in the United Kingdom Parliament, where backbench MPs, those who sit on the backbenches, can bring backbench business motions to the House for debate and voting. And this was one of those. And what we know that is that there are 650 members of Parliament in the House of Commons, and only 286 even took part in that vote last night, which means that only 44% of MPs took part in the vote, which isn't a mandate at all, even if this were a binding resolution of the United Kingdom government. Sources close to the Conservative Party pointed out that of the 303 Conservative MPs, 39 voted in favour of the motion. But if you count those who didn't attend, who didn't vote at all, 87% of the Conservatives did not in fact support the motion. And conversely, of the 258 Labour MPs, 195 voted in favour of the motion, both front and backbench MPs, with 63 Labour MPs abstaining from the vote, meaning that 75% of Labour Party MPs voted in favour of the motion. So we see a very clear split between the political parties there, which leads us to realise that this isn't a true reflection of the actual UK government's intentions, but a party political hijacking, in effect, on this very contentious issue where passions run high and the different parties take different positions regarding Israel.
No, interesting that you say that, because I think when it comes to you being in the UK right now, and there's a big push in Europe, so it seems to approve or to go for it, to approve a Palestinian state or to recognize Palestine as a state unilaterally as the push in the UN. You're sitting in the UK there, and here's my question to you. I asked the Secretary General spokesman that yesterday. It is hard for Israel, I think, to make its case when you look at the devastation of Gaza. But when you look at sentiments, and this is basically a personal question to you, Jonathan, when you look at sentiments towards Israel in the press and the international media following this summer's war, I mean, does it seem like basically Israel is not making its case right, or that emotions usually run high, as you said, but more towards the Palestinian cause?
I think images of war are always very emotive for any population and for prime ministers and cabinet ministers and ordinary members of parliament.
No, there was incredible destruction in Gaza. We can't avoid that. We can't.
That's correct. Yeah. But what the difference is that there's been incredible destruction across certain parts of the Middle East, which have not prompted the same level of response here. So that's been interesting for those of us analysing, commentating on the news and what's going on there, because we try to establish what it is that made Gaza different for the news media and therefore for the general population. It's very hard to put your finger on exactly what is the difference here. I think the frustration with politicians, and we heard this over and over again in that debate in the Commons, is that this has been going on for so long as they see it. And those who understand the details and nuances of it not so well are often inclined to have simplistic or very definite sweeping views of what needs to happen. And that's really, in a way, what some of the members of parliament speaking in the Commons debate here were doing. They were saying, this has gone on too long. We need to put pressure on Israel. Jack Straw in particular was saying this. We need to put pressure on Israel. It's all Bibi Netanyahu understands. He said, without that pressure, peace talks won't resume, peace won't come. Of course, this assumes that is all that is stopping peace talks from happening, not any of the many other issues, which are in fact making it very difficult for Israelis and Palestinians on both sides, issues on both sides,
very
making
true.
it hard for them to actually even engage in negotiations at the moment, not least the idea that there is some sort of unity government of two groups, both of whose democratic mandate is well and truly lapsed, one of whom is a terrorist organization.
Jonathan Sacherdoti, very, very true words. Thank you for joining us from London, European correspondent Jonathan Sacherdoti there for I-24 News. And true, when we don't understand the Middle East ourselves as we live here, it's hard to expect that people who live outside will do. But coming up next, 4,500 pro-Israel Christians are in Israel to show support for the country. Again, people coming from the outside, picking sides. We will take a closer look. First, though, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Thank you for staying with us. I-24 News, where I drop my pen. Morning edition, the place you should be, October 15, 2014. And it is the place you should be, and you know why. Because Anthony Grant joins me daily to discuss the news you missed while scanning the headlines. Sporting a beautiful gray suit this morning.
Yeah, it's an autumnal look.
Autumnal look.
Yeah. Gray clouds, gray clothes.
And I'm going to steal a great joke from a friend of mine, 3 shades of gray. Yes.
There you go.
Okay. Yes.
And many shades of grappling, according to this headline from Time. And again, this is not something that I think we missed, but it's just gaining a lot of traction in the press, how Israel's grappling with the British vote to recognize Palestine. Yep. There you go. So, and apparently Israel, according to this story, Israel is doing its best to downplay the impact and to kind of downplay the impact.
Yeah. And it's hard to do because Britain is a major, major international player.
It is.
And of course, that vote does not mean that on the ground something will happen, but it's these unilateral moves.
And I wonder if before this vote, if maybe the Queen said to the British Parliament, think very carefully.
Before you go ahead and vote.
Or they just did their own thing anyway.
My God.
Yeah,
no,
so it's one to watch, to say the least.
Definitely. And it's an interesting point where I think you and I discussed this several days ago or last week in the show, that all these European countries voting to recognize Palestine as a state, it's very, one wonders what stands behind it, because it can't be constructive to a peace process that purports to be bilateral.
Exactly, yeah.
So
They're complicating factors, in
exactly,
some would say. Yes.
A little bit more than, the people of the region do themselves.
Exactly.
Yes.
Speaking of the region, interesting story from Daily Star Beirut saying Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader, visited Bekaa area of Lebanon yesterday, pledging to defeat jihadists. And interesting language he used. First of all, this visit for him to go to this area is quite rare.
Right, true.
And he said that he's vowing to defeat terrorist groups while warning Israel that he stands ready for any confrontation despite the battle against extremists. And it seems like, in a way, he's speaking on behalf of Lebanon, although no one really asked him to.
Yeah.
No surprise there. And he slammed.
He has a tendency to do
There's
that.
a tendency.
Yeah.
And he slammed the U.S.-led international coalition against ISIS as calling it a media alliance.
A media alliance.
Yeah. So.
But to be honest, actually, that's not a bad name.
It's not.
It's not a bad description.
But he's weighing
alliance.
in on it.
He's weighing in. It doesn't want to be left out. But it's interesting that you say that, and of course, on the sideline saying, he will not lose an opportunity to warn Israel that war is still coming.
And he keeps talking about the resistance, and it makes me wonder the resistance against what? There's a lot of, I think, anger issues there at many levels, but, well,
but yeah, we're going to look at that. Anger issues are, I think, a regional problem.
A regional problem.
A regional problem.
Yes,
anger issues is good. Yeah.
Front and center of a lot of anger issues in Turkey, and confusing times in many levels there. The Wall Street Journal has this headline that the Syrian clash jolts Turkish peace talks, referring, of course, to Turkish peace talks with the Kurds within Turkey. And on Monday, Ankara put forward a new peace plan to Kurdish deputies, but now they're facing apparently a big dilemma. Either they reverse a state policy decades old by backing Kurdish defenders of Kobani on the border with Syria, whom Ankara deems terrorists, or they have to basically refuse humanitarian aid and risk inflaming tensions within Turkey even more. So people accuse Turkey of playing both sides of the fence. On a certain level, their hands are a little bit tied with the Kurds.
The problem with Kobani, which has been in the news for the last 3 weeks, the place of intense fighting and thousands of refugees trying to flee, but that all falls into the Kurdish problem for both the Kurds and the Turks on that border. And we keep forgetting, I think, something that the West, dare I say, is not ignoring but not really taking into consideration, is that this region, once you pick sides, there are so many animosities even within the current battles that this is just, how should I put it, a colossal mess.
Yeah, involving fluid borders and all that sort of thing too. So interesting times in Turkey, to say the least. And of course, this broke yesterday from The Guardian, but it bears mentioning in a headline that the UN medical official died of Ebola in a German hospital. And as, of course, coming on the heels of this horrible warning from the World Health Organization that there could be, in 2 months' time, up to 10,000 cases of Ebola a week in West African nations. And, when we're talking about sending American troops and they're over there now to help, and you get headlines like this, it makes you think, wow, this could be really as bad as it sounds on some levels at least.
And I'm very glad, listen, we did, we of course covered Ebola at the beginning of the show, but this is, but this is a great headline, I'll tell you why, because if there are 10,000 cases in West Africa, as the World Health Organization says, and it's great that you brought that, I think had it not been for these several few cases in the Western world, this headline would not make, would not make news. Because at the end of the day, for many, many years, a lot of Africans have been dying of Ebola, but it seems like, like the West and the World Health Organization didn't really deal with it until it's now reaching the West. So, I mean...
Yeah, it's the cultural backdrop to the medical stuff on the front burner, absolutely.
I'll be the one voicing my opinion, you will be lowering it down.
No, there's definitely something that you're not the first to mention it.
And Africa having the problem that, unlike the West, they cannot quarantine so fast as we do in the Western world.
Right.
If somebody's diagnosed here, they have 3 ambulances and not enough mechanism in place.
It bears mentioning that there's another UN official or medical assistant who's actually still getting treatment in Frankfurt. So eyes are on that case as well. And happily, Kim Jong-un is on the mend. Yes, he appeared in public with a walking stick.
Aha!
Yes.
Aha! The butler did it.
Lending credence to the whole ankle issue problem. Yeah, although he...
No, because you and I have been discussing for about a month, was it? Where is the man?
Where is he?
There he is.
There he is. And apparently he has slimmed down a bit.
Yes.
Judging by that picture.
What are the rumors of, there was the ankle thing, right?
The ankles because he was wearing Cuban high heels. Or high
I
heels.
love that. Yeah, I love that.
To appear taller, like many a politician would like to, I think, appear taller.
Yes.
Not so tall. And he really
Although,
likes Swiss
being
cheese.
short boded well for Napoleon. Yes, and?
It did.
Yes,
The Swiss cheese stuff. Likes that.
And?
Los Angeles Times is following this interesting story of the Democratic Secretary of State of the good state of Kentucky, who's running for U.S. Senator against Republican incumbent Mitch McConnell, who's the Senate Minority Leader right now. And she will not say whether or not she voted for Obama in 2012, even though she is running as a Democrat.
Interesting.
Yeah. She adamantly...
That might be her winning ticket.
It might be. But she defends her right to not disclose who she voted for, even though she's a public official running for public office, and it's courting controversy because people are saying, just say it. Did you or didn't you? Yeah, and again, it's become a hot button issue because Obama is, in many circles, losing a lot of his base support. And
to see people from within the Democratic Party trying to distance themselves.
Yeah.
Because once you say, I'm reserving the right not to answer, you're essentially almost saying, I did not vote for him. In many ways.
Yeah.
So fascinating stuff.
Interesting stuff to watch there. As the elections approach there in Washington.
November, exactly, Senate and Congress.
On a sad note here, culturally speaking, Mark Bell, who was a big producer of electronic music, and notably in the 90s, passed away at the quite young age there, 43. I'm not sure exactly why, some complications. Yeah, he worked with Depeche Mode. And he was, working with, I'd say, the homogenic album of Bjork in, I think, in 1997. This was really like a huge sound of a decade in a way, and it's very sad to see that.
Even I, I'm still stuck at the Tony Bennett age of music. Even I know who Mark Bell was. That's very sad.
LFO and all the rest of it. So the world of music mourns his passing, and there could be music coming to Detroit. According to another Wall Street Journal story.
Finally?
Yeah. Okay. Berliners are seeing Detroit's techno potential.
Really?
Yeah. They look at they do. Some people see a derelict building covered in graffiti with smashed windows riddled with asbestos, but a German club owner says, no, this could be a disco. Yeah. Listen, Detroit could use an extra helping hand. I think a lot of people would say.
Bring in the Germans.
The Germans are very efficient, and they could whip that building into shape in no time.
Yeah, amen. Tony, thank you so much for doing this morning, and of course we will see you a little bit later.
See you soon.
On to our next topic. While Israel faces global criticism in the wake of Operation Protective Edge, 4,500 pro-Israel Christians arrived to Israel to show support for the country. Prominent leaders of major Jewish and Christian called the world leaders to take urgent, determined actions to stop the brutal persecution of Christians in the Middle East in a Jerusalem press conference. Now, the joint initiative was unveiled at the Sukkot celebration sponsored by the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem. And let's take a look at Tal Shalev's report and take it from there.
Brazil.
While many in the world are growing impatient with the Israeli government's policies, one group's support for Israel remains unchanged and is in fact actually growing by the day. Just hear the masses of Christians chanting this week in Jerusalem.
We receive so many blessings from doing that, from obedience to our Father God, but to be in this wonderful, wonderful place and to feel His presence is just absolutely amazing.
A record number of more than 5,000 believers from over 80 countries arrived to celebrate the annual Evangelical Feast of Tabernacles. They don't mind the recent Gaza conflict or the ongoing settlement activity. On the contrary, the Evangelical Church's connection to the Jewish people and Zionism stems from a unique theological reading of the Bible, according to which the Jewish people are the chosen people, and their modern revival in the Holy Land is a fulfillment of God's promise.
If you are a Christian, and you don't understand the significance of Israel, then you need to review your Christianity. Because Israel is so central in the Christian faith, so much that we believe that everything will start or started and will end with Israel.
For years, they have been promoting a close relationship with Israel, touring the land en masse, supporting the government, fiercely objecting Israeli territorial concessions and dividing Jerusalem, and funding public buildings and institutions both inside Israel and in the West Bank settlements. Israel, for its part, keeps in close contact with pro-Israel members of parliament and ministers, aiming to spread its message.
What we are doing here, we are trying to look at communities, grassroots, of those that have sympathy to Israel, then to find their representatives in their parliaments, that they will feel safe, that they are representing a big crowd of people.
This year, in the wake of Christian persecution all around the Middle East, the masses were joined by the World Jewish Congress, which is launching an initiative calling on world leaders to speak out against the plight of Christian communities in the region.
We talk about something like 120,000 Christians are killed each year, and no one says anything. What does that mean? Well, we have to stand together, Jews and Christians, and we have to talk out in one voice. Enough is enough. We cannot do it. We Jews know what happens when the world is silent. And we are reaching out to Christians and saying, we have the same stake. We have the same belief.
Many Jews in Israel and abroad warn that the evangelical apocalyptic theology is bad news for Jews. But at the end of the day, with Israel's growing fear of international isolation, it needs all the friends it can get. Tal Shalev, I-24 News, Jerusalem.
And we're joined via Skype from Tel Aviv by the Honorable Member of the Parliament of South Africa, Mr. Kenneth Michaud. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yes, you did well, thank you.
Lovely. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Mr. Michaud, I have a question to you. You know, at a time where Israel is facing so much scrutiny around the world after Operation Protective Edge, and obviously also at the UN after this past September's UNGA, is it the criticism, is it hard to face the criticism of, supporting Israel's cause and, dare I say, even their right-wing causes so wholeheartedly in this day and age?
Much of this criticism is unfair and is not based on truth. When you look at what's happening in Israel, Israel is a democratic state where all religions are protected. There are people, obviously, who are trying to use language that will inflame the emotions of people, such as that Israel is an apartheid state. Obviously, as a man who was born under an apartheid government and country, I know that there is no truth in that. It's just a lie. And many people who are anti-Israel have never been to Israel. They don't see all the facts. They don't know what is happening. They are just depending and working and acting and reacting on emotions. So it is important that people who love truth need to say to the world that every person has the right to live. Now, when you look at both Christianity and Judaism, it teaches that we must love our neighbors. Now, other people don't talk that language. So we are saying Israel has the right to exist as a state, and every person has the right, and every country also has the right to self-defense. So there are people who are saying, Israel, when you are attacked with rockets, just fold your arms and do nothing. And we are saying it is unfair. Now, when a person responds or reacts in order to protect themselves, it is obvious that there will be some unintended consequences, and there might be somebody nearby who might be hurt in the process, but the world must not be hypocritical. Right. The world must agree that every state on earth has the right to exist, number one, and number two, it has the right to self-defense. So we are here as people who believe in truth and justice to say there is no country in the world that does not believe in self-defense. So Israel also must be given the right to self-defense.
Mr. Michaud, sadly, all the time we have this morning, there's so much more I would love to discuss with you. Hopefully next time you are in town. But we will revisit the story of the Christian Parliament visiting Israel in our next item with I-24 diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev. An exclusive interview she had with Mr. Ron Lauder, who was one of the main leaders of this conference that was held in Israel. Stick with us. First, though, the morning headlines. Welcome back. It is still Wednesday, October 15th, 2014. This is still the morning edition. Last I checked, yes, I'm still Yael Levi, and thank you for staying with us. On to our next topic. He's an American businessman, art collector, philanthropist, political activist, and possibly one of Israel's best friends. Ron Lauder, the man who Forbes magazine estimated is worth at approximately $4 billion, uses much of his time and money to help what he calls the cause of Israel. In that capacity, he's also the president of the World Jewish Federation, and our own Tal Shalev sat with him. And of course, we are joined in studio by I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev, who had the pleasure of sitting with Mr. Ron Lauder. And do tell us what came out of that sit-down.
Well, it was a very interesting sit-down. Lauder did arrive this week to Israel. This time, he's here all the time, but this time he arrived as part of the big evangelical gathering in Jerusalem at the Feast of Tabernacles. And this year, the World Jewish Congress joined the evangelicals and in launching an initiative against the plight of the Christians in the Middle East, calling on world leaders to speak out. And this was very important for Mr. Lauder to emphasize. It was one of the points he wanted to explain. And we did ask him, though, it is one of the connection and the bond between the Jewish people and between the state of Israel and the evangelical church. It's not, even though the evangelicals are Israel's best friends in the world, it is under controversy.
Under controversy, no, definitely, and a point that I very much want to, hear more about what he had to say. That said, let's first take a look at this exclusive interview Tal Shalev had with Ron Lauder.
The special conference put on by the World Jewish Congress, as well as the Israel Allies Foundation and the Christian Embassy Jerusalem Foundation, and here 3,000 evangelicals are coming, plus people from different parliamentarians all over. They come here once a year. They're the greatest supporters of Israel. They come from 30 or 40 different countries, and they're the people who stand up for Israel in the world. In the United States, they're almost 37% of the population, and they're the most active, and they're the best friends we have. There are always people who will be against something, but at the same time, we need friends, and we need many, many friends. These people stand up for us. And today, in this world, when there are so many lies being told about Israel, there's some group that stands up and talks and says it like it is, and says the truth, believes in Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, believes, and that's very important. The greatest threat today for the Jewish people is the fact of media and what is happening. And the media is biased against Israel. We read newspapers where the only pictures they show are pictures of disaster in Gaza, showing nothing about what happened in Israel. We see it on television, we see it in different reports. That's our threat. We have to do more in the whole field of Hasbara. The Jewish people have to feel that they are not being attacked, but the fact is that the media is being fair, and it's not fair at this moment. We need to do more to get out the message, and shows like this are extraordinarily important. The potential of the Middle East is enormous. If Israel had peace with its neighbors, there's no end to what can be done. Right now, it's a very interesting thing. Prime Minister Netanyahu, when he spoke at the UN, spoke about a relationship between Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and different moderate countries. And it's very important. But it's very important to do everything we can to reach out into a region. Again, the average person in the street doesn't really understand what is happening. We must do everything we can in the region to reach out to people. We must do more shows in Arabic. We must reach out to people through the internet. That's the future. So that people understand what the message is, because they're only hearing one message that's coming from other countries showing Israel in the worst possible light. We must reach out. The younger generation, which is the most influential today, are only listening to internet. Fill the internet with positive things. Here in Israel, we have very, very interesting, powerful internet companies that are not reaching out into the region. But again, it's the combination of Christian and Jews together which will make the difference.
was an exclusive interview of the president with the president of the Jewish Congress, of the World Jewish Congress, by Tal Shalev, with me in the studio. As you said, he came here basically with the annual evangelist, I'm going to call it the evangelistical conference that happens every year. The evangelists are a controversial, sticky point internationally for Israel. They do support its existence heavily, but if one looks at the charter, they also support it because, in the scriptures or their belief, it is the Jewish people, the chosen Jewish people, that will come here and eventually bring about the rapture that afterwards will kill us all. So in many ways that is controversial, but he never really addresses that because there's so much money flowing with that, with that annual conference, isn't it?
Well, I think it's a bit, to be fair, it's more than money. It's true, the money comes, and it comes into Israel. It comes into Israel institutions inside the West Bank, a lot of important institutions.
It's money that goes into the settlements.
No, some of it goes into Israel. Some of it goes into hospitals, academy, inside the Green Line. But yes, a majority of institutions and public buildings around the settlements have been built and have been funded by the evangelical community. And there's another point that both Jewish Orthodox and in Israel and American liberals in the United States, they of course do not like this connection. They don't like this bond, each one from their own. The Jewish Orthodox in Israel are afraid of the money. They're afraid of missionaries.
Right.
And the American liberal Jews are not happy with some other of the values that the evangelical church represents, such as marriage, anti-choice, pro-birth, pro-child. So this is one of the points that, yes, their money is not clean here, but they are going through some kind of process that they're becoming more and more acceptable. For instance, the Israeli president, Rubi Rivlin, was the keynote speaker at their gala event this week. For the first time, such a high official dignitary. Usually we know that the Likud officials...
to distance themselves.
No, the Likud... the president used to distance himself, and Rivlin came there. It's very important for them, and it's also important to note that the right wing, that in the United States specifically, we know the evangelical Americans, that's what we usually talk about, but the evangelical church is spreading all around the world in countries that it can make an influence on their foreign policy. It can make an influence on the way they treat Israel in countries that are important.
Although I will argue to that, sadly, is that their agenda or their core beliefs do support just one side of the conflict at the end of the day. They can influence, as you said, a lot of world leaders, but it's the no division to Jerusalem and and their support of settlements, which may form a problem if ever this process is to progress. But you sat with Ron Lauder at these very tumultuous times, and it's a great opportunity to sit with one of the wheelers and dealers monetarily that brings a lot of money into Israel. There are things, though, he would not agree to speak about,
of course.
Right? Like what?
Okay, well, first of all, he did not agree to speak about his relationship with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Lauder and Netanyahu go way back. They were very, very close for many years. And in the past few years, there's been a rift between them. Some blame it for Lauder was the owner of the Israeli Channel 10, and they had a Channel 10 had two reports, one against Netanyahu and one's against Netanyahu's sponsor, Sheldon Edelson, that is reportedly the reason. But and they have also had rifts on policy in the past 2 years. Lauder has been a bit more outspoken, criticizing Netanyahu for no diplomatic initiative. And just last month, during the UNGA, there was a report that actually Netanyahu was set to meet Lauder in London, in New York, on the sidelines of the UNGA. And reportedly, Netanyahu stood up, and Lauder was waiting in the lobby for 3 hours, reportedly. Of course, Lauder didn't agree to comment on that, not even speak about it. And another thing he didn't agree, he has been outspoken about President Obama, an outspoken critic of President Obama, and he did say that he does not, and this is something we hear from a lot of Americans to come to Israel, they do not criticize the president or its policy while they're abroad. Right. So that is something we didn't get from him, but we did get a chance to ask him, because of these close connections between Netanyahu and Lauder, about 16 years ago, in 1998, he was actually requested by Netanyahu to create a backtrack negotiation between Israel and Syria. At the time, we're talking about President Hafez al-Assad, and these negotiations that he started out actually did lead to the Shepherdstown Summit, and
we're supposedly very close to some sort of a deal. deal between Israel and Syria.
Supposedly. Let's hear, we had a chance to ask him about
Let's
it.
quickly hear what he had to say about that. Oh, sadly, we don't have that. There we go.
Had we been able to have a peace treaty with Syria, the whole Middle East might have been very different, because along with that would have come Lebanon at that time, which could have been and was still very much a Muslim-Christian balance. Things would have been very different. But we can't look back, we have to look forward.
How close were Israel and Syria to reaching an agreement at the time?
We'll never know.
Okay.
So that actually, Tal Shalev, it's almost of an admission that something was very close. And obviously, you know, his opinion that this was a huge miss when it comes to the Middle East that we're looking at today. Fascinating stuff, Tal Shalev. Thank you so much for bringing Ron Lauder's interview to us. Do stay with us, because this is where it all becomes newsy. Yes.
Yeah,
this is what we're bringing the
yeah.
biggest headlines, anything that's spiraling out there on the web.
Well, you know, it's hard to listen to the name Lauder without also thinking about makeup. You know, Estee Lauder.
Yes,
and,
where the money comes from.
And when we talk about makeup, that's true, a lot of it. And of course, makeup and Bruce Jenner.
Of course.
Yes.
Because that's the first connection that comes to mind.
Yes. Well, people have been saying he's been looking very ladylike in recent weeks. And has there been a sex change?
No.
No. Now, listen.
Okay.
Whoa. Okay. Apparently,
ouch.
Apparently, sources have said that Bruce Jenner was ready for a sex change 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. Not that he had one, because he does have 2 daughters with Kris Jenner, with whom he just got divorced. But people are saying, was this maybe one of the reasons for that divorce, that he has decided to go for a more feminine sort of existence?
Well, call me agreeable, but I think they might be right.
Yeah,
Look
well,
at
you know,
this, you know?
I mean, for those that don't know, I mean, this is a former Olympic champion.
There's a little
you know,
hint
a lot
there of like something that might be, you know, begging for a bra.
I didn't even get down that far.
Come on.
I was focused on the facial situation there.
Tom, you know, weigh in.
Leave me out.
Leave me out.
I mean, you know, this is the stuff that Americans, you know,
yes,
this is meat and
this
potatoes.
This is the stuff that leads the news.
It does. I mean, you know, and this is, you know, he's an inspiration to us all. I mean, from athletics right up to the makeup counter. Now, his daughters are in the news for another reason. Kendall and Kyle Jenner made the Times 25 most influential teens of 2014 list, along with Malayla. Now, the youngest ever winner of the Nobel Peace Prize.
I'm sorry, we're living in a time where there's a list of the most influential teens.
Now listen to what they've done. They've hosted red carpet events. They've had a ghost-written novel come out and released clothing and nail polish lines.
And how old are they?
Yeah,
they're in their teens, 18 and 17 respectively.
18 and 17 respectively.
Yes. And they're the half-sisters of Kim Kardashian, so they're also...
enough said.
Yeah,
enough said.
But
and right up there with Malala.
Right up there with Malala, yes. Yeah. But people have been tweeting their discontent, saying, how can you put them in the same category? Although they're entrepreneurial, and in the United States, of course, that is a value which is very highly prized.
And maybe they are exactly what Pakistan needs. So who knows?
And, you know... Maybe in a way, you know.
In a way. Fascinating.
Fascinating stuff. Chris Brown has weighed in on the Ebola crisis.
Good.
Now, this is...
Because we've been waiting.
Courting some Twitter controversy by saying that he thought that the Ebola epidemic is a form of population control. Now, he promptly deleted the tweet, but it's the same thing. People don't get it. You put the tweet out there.
It's out there.
It's out there. You can hit delete.
Exactly. It doesn't work.
But people have already made it into headlines. Now, of course, he backtracked and saying, well, no,
I'm not a crazy conspiracy theorist.
Right.
Yeah.
But Rihanna was laughing at him. You know, of course, he was jailed for once attacking her.
I was going to say, thank God she's not living with him anymore.
Exactly. Speaking of people who are not living together anymore.
Yes.
I don't know if they were shacking up or not, but they were seeing each other. Richard Gere and Padma Lakshmi.
Isn't he married?
Well.
Was.
You know who was married in the past, of course, more than once, I think, was Padma Lakshmi, the Top Chef host. You know, she used to go out with Salman Rushdie.
Exactly.
That was a marriage.
Then, yes.
But they were divorced. Then she was going out with Adam Dell, Michael Dell, computer maker's brother. You know, I think what's going on here,
An intensely private 6-month romance.
Okay, yeah, I mean, involving Richard Gere. I mean, how private?
Intensely private.
You know, I mean, he's like a born American gigolo.
So many things I could say right now.
Now, I want to mention this. You know that he was filming a movie this summer called Time Out of Mind with Oren Moverman.
All right,
the
the
Israeli filmmaker,
yes,
about a homeless guy in New York, and so it's an interesting kind of shift for Gere.
And a great filmmaker at that. Israeli went to film school and makes films. I went to film school. I don't.
I think that there is a film that I think you may have made. Yes.
True.
Involving
And real quickly, one more.
Hipster T-shirts.
Yes.
Adweek says, what's up with these people that are wearing these hipster T-shirts and brands that they would actually never shop at?
I never shopped at.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
and sadly, I'm being told that
but
this is all time for us for brand hipster T-shirts. So we're just going to go to the news, and thank you for that. Good morning. Thank you for joining us, staying with us. I-24 News Morning Edition. It is October 15th, 2014, the place you should be, because we are joined yet again by I-24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev with my favorite segment of the week, the weekly mix of politics and Instagram. Politicians shooting themselves, selfing themselves. What do you have for us?
Well, today we're starting off with Twitter, unfortunately, but it's
the viral spiral that is politics. Yes.
Yeah, well, we all were, some of us, not all of us, but some of us were waiting up on a few nights ago till 12 o'clock at night to see what is the result of the British House of Commons vote on recognizing the state of Palestine. And one of the people that were there is the Israeli Arab MK, Ahmed Tibi, who posted these two photos on Twitter. We can see one, the first photo isn't really good, but it's inside the House of Commons, but the second one is with the big sign, yes, vote for a Palestinian state. And this, of course, Ahmed Tibi being in London, prompted calls from the right-wing side of the Israeli Knesset, calling to sack him from Knesset. And Tibi has this tendency to get involved. He's, of course, very pro-Palestinian, so every time he goes somewhere, he gets sacked, he gets slammed for something, and he's definitely...
He generates great self-PR, I have to say.
Absolutely. That's his job.
And he's a doctor. Maybe it's because he's a doctor,
He's a
Dr.
gynecologist,
Friedman.
by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
And a good one at that.
But he has a sense of humor.
Right.
Yes.
The thing about him is he has a great sense of humor. I think he might be one of the funniest Knesset members around.
Is he the one with the poem? With the tea poem at the parliament?
No, that's Eitan Kabel.
Okay.
He was also really good. He's also very funny.
He's also very funny.
But he did post quite an interesting tweet after that. He said that it's good to be an Arab Israeli MK. The best advantage of being an Arab Israeli MK is that every time he suggests to establish a Palestinian state or criticizes Israel, he gets a free ticket to Syria, Gaza, and this time London. So
I don't understand what's the big deal. I mean, the Brits still live under the impression that they rule the world. And I have some news for them. They don't.
They don't? Yeah, the sun has already set. Yeah, some people would argue maybe they should still rule Palestine/Israel. Yes.
Okay, so we'll move on to whoever also thinks they still rule the world, and some people doubt that. That's, of course, the Americans.
Yes, I know. It's beginning to be slightly, well, it's in question. Yeah.
One of our all-time favorites, though. Okay, so this is what the leader, not the leader, but the second leader of the strongest country in the world is doing this week.
Vice President Joe Biden.
Vice President Joe Biden, we can start calling him by the name Ice Cream Guy.
Oh, my God.
Apparently...
Well, he found something to do.
Apparently... Biden is a genuine lover of ice cream. He posted this week, and he said, Sundays are for Sundays, which is a nice
Sunday ice cream,
what a nice word.
Cute.
But he also went...
Whoa!
Okay, this is a much better picture. This is actually one of the Instagram account, VP Joe Biden. It's not a real Instagram account. It's one of the jokes about the vice president. But this is him. He was on a campaign trail helping one of the senators in Portland be reelected, and he went into ice cream parlor. If you want to know, he had a scoop of chocolate wood block and double fold vanilla. And he's, of course, wearing his signature Ray-Bans.
That is more than a scoop.
And there was
yeah.
the photo, not this photo, but there was an AP photo taken that he's really licking. You can actually see him licking the ice cream cone.
Yeah.
And that photo went totally viral.
Yeah, I just want to say that in the event, God forbid, that something ever happened to the President of the United States, this man, ladies and gentlemen, will be the leader of the free world.
I like him, and I like ice cream, so I think we should stop
You're
at
fine
this
with
moment.
it.
I'm fine with him having as much. You know who else likes ice cream?
John Kerry.
No, the Israeli Prime Minister. He also got 10,000. You know, there was a big story about him.
The ice cream and how much it costs.
$10,000 a month.
They get along better. Biden and Bibi get along better.
I think when you have the money to buy good ice cream, that makes it easier to love it and take those pictures.
And it's our money, by the way.
Yeah, I know. But Tal, you and I have to discuss your taste in men. Yes, move forward.
Okay, we'll move forward to, one woman we do agree upon is, of course, the one and only Queen Rania. It's time.
And we also agree about her husband.
And we agree about her. We agree about the whole family.
The Jordanian royal family. Yes, more power to them.
The closest we get to royalty here in the Middle East.
Royalty. Yes.
Well, she posted a great photo this week. I just couldn't.
Where is that photo? Can we see this photo?
It's a throwback photo of little child Rania with when we can see it soon.
And this is Throwback Thursday?
This is Throwback Thursday. That's Rania's father, and Rania on the left.
God.
And she looks amazing.
And she was blonde.
And she was blonde. And,
she can still be blonde.
Yeah.
And on the right is her brother. And, she actually grew up in Tulkarem, very close to here. So maybe we assume this picture could have been taken in Tulkarem, which makes me immediately feel much closer. This is it's just a few meters away, a few kilometers away. So you see, we can all find our connection to royalty in some way. Prince Harry,
Queen
Rania,
Rania, Palestinian in origin from Tulkarem.
Palestinian origin from Tulkarem with a beautiful family, and she did grow a beautiful family of her own. We have to say.
Of her own, and this is a princess story.
And this is a princess story
completely.
And last, if we're talking about royal families, remember Gideon Sa'ar, the Israeli politician,
interior minister, who resigned famously.
Because of his love to his new wife, Geulah
In
Evan.
a very American way, he resigned. I have to say, like this press conference, right? Yeah, he resigned almost like a man who's running.
For the next phase of his
career. Exactly. Yes.
Well, since he resigned, and of course he resigned because of his love for his family, and he wants to promote his family.
I am the Queen of England. I never said
So he's been posting a lot of photos of his son, even more than before.
Oh my God!
And this is little David. Here we can't see, but we actually know that last week and during the Sukkot holiday, he started to walk. And
oh my God.
These are the photos he's been posting all week. This is from 1 week.
In case you did not believe me, I am home. Listen, I don't. This is a very sweet picture, but I have to say, wow.
And I have to say, because he's been posting these photos this week, I've been doubting really the integrity, the sincerity.
No, not only that. I have to say, listen, I'm one of those very, very intense people of. I don't post pictures of my children on social media. To me and my husband, it's the thing of, when they're old enough to decide that they want to be splattered on social media, then they can open their own account, which will be probably in 25 years. But when they can make their own decisions. That said, this is such a campaign. You said I'm doubting it. This is a campaign to run once. I'm assuming that when David, what's the kid's name? David?
David.
When he goes into preschool in 2 years, then we'll see a picture of, and now I'm ready to be your prime minister. Wow.
But he's our little George, We don't have any other princes here. He's our royal heir, so...
David's our royal heir.
Well...
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
Let's hope for something more.
For something more fascinating stuff.
I vote for Rania,
you vote for Rania. Yeah. Okay. And we are, of course, with the fabulous Professor Friedman.
That's right.
Yeah, with the latest in medical news. Very important these days. I'm not going to drill you on Ebola.
No. Yeah, let's not talk about Ebola. We can talk about when I come back from the conference in San Diego.
In San Diego, and do not stop in Dallas. Go ahead. What do you have for us?
Well, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, and the notion was that if you smoke a joint or marijuana, your creativity is increased. And the one very famous proponent of that was the late Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple.
Yes, and there are some that will argue that maybe that is correct.
Okay, so this is a small study that has actually tested whether anything creative in divergent or convergent thinking is related to the active substance in marijuana, tetrahydrocannabinol, and the results
locally
are
known
in,
as grass.
And yes, aka grass.
AKA grass,
and the results are clear. There is absolutely no increase in creativity. There is absolutely nothing. It just makes you feel better, you know. And unlike ex-President Clinton, who smoked and did not inhale, everybody in my age group smoked and also inhaled.
But maybe it's the placebo. If you feel better and create better.
That's
fine. Isn't that much better than the Virginia Woolf? I have to be miserable to create.
No. I totally agree with that. But it does not increase creativity, and the truth needs to be out there. You know,
I mean, you're killing every myth for me. Sorry, you're killing my beliefs, because last week you were here with, acupuncture does absolutely nothing for you.
Acupuncture is, we can talk more about it. Now, we advocate for years that healthy lifestyle is good for your health. Now, this is...
tell me it's not.
No, it is absolutely right. But this time, the end point was stroke in women. And women who have adhered to the 5 very simple rules of healthy behavior: normal weight, healthy diet, exercise, not too much, not smoking at all, and up to 9 drinks a week, have reduced the risk for developing stroke by 50 to 60%.
Tal and I are damned.
9 drinks a week is okay. I'm 9 drinks a week. It's fine.
No, but are you smoking?
We don't talk about that.
We don't talk about that.
Okay.
9 drinks a week, I don't know how enough, if that's
for
enough.
those guys who started, and girls who started smoking, stop. For those who did not, please do not start. It's very bad. But it's one of the first times that has been shown conclusively that for every healthy lifestyle behavior, you decrease your risk. So the more you do, the better off you are. And the sad news is that amongst 32,000 women, only 2% have actually done all 5 of those healthy behaviors.
Can I tell you why?
Of course, you're married to us.
Exactly. It's incredibly stressful.
Yeah, I have to have a drink. I have to have a cigarette.
Stressful,
You can blame men. I blame my parents usually.
No, I do that too.
When you grow up, you'll blame men and your parents.
And it's stressful to be a woman. We try to lean in. They push us back. We need a cigarette. Yes. So now, what else?
October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and everybody's talking about female breast cancer. I want to have a spotlight on male breast cancer. Admittedly, a very rare disease. In Israel, there are about 35 to 40 cases every year. In the United States, there are only about 2,300 new cases a year. But because men are not aware of the possibility that they will develop breast cancer, their breast cancers are usually diagnosed at a much later stage, and the prognosis is poor. So there is nothing to do in terms of screening, but we know that individuals who have breast cancer in their family, or they carry deleterious mutations in specific genes, or have or are very obese and smoking, are at a high risk for developing breast cancer. So guys, be aware. You do
obviously
have
breast cancer, I'm assuming, for men, as for women, is very dangerous.
It's very dangerous, and the prognosis in men is worse than it is for women, because it is usually discovered at a later stage. So any mess, any change in the size of the breast, anything that you feel, don't say, I cannot have breast cancer. Go and see a doctor.
Go check yourself out. Yeah.
Now, very, very good news for the Jewish New Year. The lifespan in the United States has increased. It has increased to an average of 80 years.
As a Jew, I'm supposed to be happy about that. Why?
No, because it also reflects the reality in Israel. The result, but this is
okay. So the lifespan
is increasing, and it is currently at an all-time high. And the good news for you girls is that consistently throughout Western countries, except for 5 countries worldwide, women outlive men by an average of 4 to 5 years.
Well, what will we do when all the men,
when all the men die,
we're going to sit back and relax.
You get a younger guy, so you can kill him too.
Yeah, no.
I don't know. I'm thinking about a world filled with women and no men. It's not a good thought.
We share that thought.
So women living longer and life expectancy, but for all, right?
And of the 10 leading causes of death, all of them have been reduced from 2011 to 2012 by an average of 1 to 2%. So the leading cause are decreasing.
And with the leading cause being what? What was it?
The leading cause is cancer, cardiovascular disease, chronic pulmonary disease, road accidents, and suicide.
Suicide?
Yes, suicide
Okay.
is at the top 10 list for you know. And no, but you know, there are multiple reasons for suicide. There are multiple reasons for road accidents. Some of them are genetic. Some of them are incidental. But it's a very positive message. We're making great strides to reduce our risk, and we know that life expectancy, we will never live to be Methuselah. We'll never be to be
and
900 years.
To?
Exactly. What are you going to do?
I mean, at 120, we'll be incredibly bored.
Well, you know,
it's just too hard to schlep on.
Then suicide will be number one.
Oh my God.
For death. You know what the number one reason for death in some European countries? It's boredom. They just simply...
No, of course. Isn't it the country? Isn't it Sweden? All those countries that are incredibly dark and...
Yeah. Well, in Sweden, there is a peak of suicide around Christmas time, especially amongst young women, professionals who are unmarried. And it's like, you look at the graph and it's amazing.
And with that, I want to say that, here in the Middle East, we have this lovely weather. It rained like 2 seconds ago, and now it's sunny again.
Beautiful.
So we don't have a tendency to kill ourselves.
Right.
We just kill each other.
and we
solved
know
it that
we
way.
are right. This is...
Okay. Professor Friedman, thank you for joining us. Tal Shalev, as always, a rock star. And, of course, folks, I-24 News Morning Edition. Do not forget to tune in on Friday to start your day. And, of course, every single day to begin your week with us. And check us out on the web, Facebook, Twitter, I-24 News Morning Edition. Have a lovely holiday if you're celebrating Sukkot.